Trudeau steps down in disgrace. Israel and Turkey gear up for war. Monumental business shifts in America, and more on Trump, coming up on Dangerous Waters. This is the Dangerous Waters podcast, where we dive deep into dangerous waters. I'm your host, Alex, and in today's episode, we got a lot to cover. Our first story comes from Canada. Trudeau yesterday stepped down from his prime minister position as well as leader of the party. Very big news for Canada, and in effect shows the power of Trump. Even before entering presidency, he already had the ability to monumentally impact Canadian politics. And knowing as well that Trudeau has faced a lot of resistance over the past few years in Canada, this is big news and will potentially be a very large shift in Canadian politics going forward toward the next Trump term. Now, the next Canadian Prime Minister will have a lot of priorities to juggle, one of them being how to reconcile the population back and win that popular support. But on the second hand, also juggling that big behemoth being Trump, trying to annex Canada into the United States. Do you go along with that, or do you resist? As a Canadian Prime Minister, you're representing the people of Canada. I would imagine there has to be a lot of resistance there, and that would be popular. However, there is that slightly growing sentiment over time as more and more Canadians, especially those close to the American borders, see the prospects economically and culturally of a strong alignment with the United States. So it's a lot of factors to consider. We'll see how the next Prime Minister will be able to handle it once the procedures are finished taking place. For our next topic, we have a big one. Israel and Turkey are gearing up for war, and this is a development that's really been in the running for a long time. There have always been geopolitical tensions between Israel and Turkey. However, there were more behind the scenes back then. Israel did not really have many public statements about Turkey, whereas Erdogan of Turkey has been pushing for separation from Israel economically and trade-wise for a long time. They've been calling Israel perpetrators of genocide, and they have also threatened to invade Israel. And on the back of the successful Turkish armed rebellion against the Assad regime, Israel is now saying that Turkey might be a greater threat than Iran. And this makes a lot of sense in the Israeli perspective, because when you see the amount of sheer army size, over 450,000 or so active duty troops in the Turkish army, as well as the sheer proximity that Turkey has with Israel, they are much closer and a much larger present threat than Iran could possibly be. Even though Iran arguably has more military advancements than Turkey, at least homegrown domestic advancements, especially when it comes to longer range missiles. For example, Iran can strike Israel in any part of the territory using some of their longer range missiles, while Turkey only has roughly 800 kilometer range missiles, and they're working on developing 2,000 kilometer range missiles, whereas even the Houthis at this point in Yemen have missiles of a longer range, hypersonic in nature as well. So we'll talk about this more in our next topic, but it does show that the technological nature of a military is not the most important. If you are much closer to an enemy, you are able to threaten them and be able to bring troops and forces to scale that an enemy from farther away with technological superiority will not be able to do. For our next topic, we have a new arms race toward hypersonic missiles. Already multiple countries have claimed to have operational hypersonic missiles, obviously starting from China and Russia. The United States now also has hypersonic missiles in its arsenal, but we're seeing a lot more major regional players develop this technology as well. India and Pakistan have developed these missiles, as well as Iran, Yemen, and now the latest country in the foray, North Korea, who just launched what they claim a successful hypersonic missile test over the Japan Sea. So there are many countries now with this technology, but is it really hypersonic technology? That is a strong question to ask. right now, what we know at least is that the US and Russia have been developing these hypersonic technologies since the 50s. So the hypersonic nature of these missiles really being maneuverable under high levels of speed, being able to move independently. These types of characteristics are key to hypersonic missiles, and the US, China, Russia absolutely have this capability. But in terms of the other countries claiming to have maneuverable hypersonic missiles, it's very hard to say how maneuverable as well as how effective these missiles really are. We've seen, for example, Yemen, with the help of Iran, claim to have a hypersonic missile called the Palestine 2. This missile supposedly going at speeds of up to Mach 14 or so, 14 times the speed of sound, and being able to be highly maneuverable. However, they are getting shot down still by Israeli air defenses, which really goes to show the level of variability between these hypersonic systems. And hypersonic, if you really think about it at this point, is sort of a marketing buzzword. In technicality, it really means any missile traveling past 5 times the speed of sound, which most long-range ballistic missiles already reach. In fact, ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles, oftentimes reach over 27 times the speed of sound. However, it does not count as quote-unquote hypersonic now because it is not maneuverable independently that the way a lot of modern systems are. So really the capabilities of each system depends highly on each country and the technologies available in those countries. We really have no idea how to independently verify a lot of these claims, but all we can do is just say that, sure, other countries are now developing these missiles. We'll see how effective they are in war, but with its already frequent use in the war in Ukraine, it's really not serving as much of a deterrent anymore the way that they used to be seen. Moving on to domestic affairs, we have a large story coming from Meta. The CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, completely flipped his position and the company's position on free speech. For a bit of context, Meta was one of the first companies to censor Trump after the January 6th rioting, and in fact, a lot of political opinions have been censored on Instagram as well as other Meta-based platforms. This is something that's been going on for a long time. We even have the Disinformation Governance Board coming from the Homeland Security Department, as well as the FBI and other enforcement agencies of the US government, pressuring Facebook to censor certain posts going against misinformation narratives that they claim. However, this time, Mark Zuckerberg came out with a 5-minute long video explaining his reasons for why he is no longer going to be allowing third-party fact-checkers to dictate the type of content to be seen on his platforms, and at the same time, he is moving toward a community note systems similar to X, as well as having a massive dial back of content moderation systems on the platform. Obviously, he still wants to focus on controlling the illegal content, but he does say that now with Trump coming into presidency, he feels a political shift is happening in America. He wants to make sure that free speech becomes a priority on his platforms, and he also wants to push these ideals to the European side, who he views as being increasingly going in the wrong direction as it comes to censorship. Now, I think this move is very well timed, especially because Elon Musk has been facing a lot of controversy recently, not just from the H-1B visa immigration side, but he's also been demonetizing certain controversial and racially biased figures, while simultaneously he has been changing the algorithm of X/Twitter to be more positive, which means what if you are saying something that's negative? I mean, a lot of politics is negative in nature, so is he censoring certain political opinions? Is there any transparency in the type of algorithms that are being placed upon this new policy? Who knows? I don't really think we'll see that, and this is really a lot of actions pushing toward a possible start of censorship on Elon Musk's platforms. So Mark Zuckerberg coming in and saying these things is really at a great time strategically in trying to win people back to his platforms, knowing his stance now on free speech. We'll see how this plays out in the future and if Elon Musk is able to clarify and rectify the situation that he's in. Yesterday was January 6th, which meant that Trump was electorally certified in Congress, and by tradition, it is the vice president, in this case Kamala Harris, the loser of the 2024 election, certifying her own loss. And I think it's a really bittersweet moment for her. I would not want to be part of that process and be responsible for that role. And you can tell from her facial expressions that she was uncomfortable during that time. But even looking past that, there was a pretty noticeable Democratic shift in policy behind the scenes, in which every time the Democrats lost an election over the past 52 years, they have in some level tried to challenge the electoral results. This time there were 0 challenges. They wanted a completely smooth Trump inauguration, and it really goes to show that they want at least the American people to see that we are consistent in our message of the peaceful transition of power, and we're not going to play any games this time around. It does mean still that they have a lot coming during the Trump administration, especially when it comes to fighting his policies in the courts. So we'll see what's going to amount from those court challenges, especially as Trump will be enacting a large amount of presidential pardons and executive orders on his first day in office, reinstating many of the border policies that he had in place during his first administration. We'll see where that takes us. Let's get into rapid fire news. From ABC7, New York judge denies Donald Trump's request to halt sentencing in hush money case. From New York Times, first bird flu death in the U.S. reported in Louisiana. From CNN, a government study finds that children exposed to higher fluoride levels have lower IQs. From AP, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake kills at least 95 people in western China near Mount Everest. And finally, from the Washington Post, the U.S. transfers 11 prisoners from Guantanamo Bay to Oman. With that being said, that wraps up today's episode of Dangerous Waters. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And as always, I will see you all in the next one.